I went to high school in Kansas City. Um, Graduated from high school in Kansas City. Came to New York, and my sister was here living and was working here. So I came and lived with her to go to college. And this is during World War II. After I finished college, I worked for a couple of years, and then I decided that I would go on to graduate school, which I did. When I graduated from high school, from a graduate school, I had started, had enrolled to go back to school to do postgraduate work, and a friend of my sister's who had worked with her in the NAACP, who was the director of branches and field administration of the organization at that time, asked me if I would come and do a special project. I said, oh no, I'm going on to this. So he persisted and persisted. He said, you can go back to school in January for the second semester. And finally, I agreed to do a temporary assignment in Baltimore, Maryland, for the NAACP, for him, for the branch, Baltimore branch. NAACP needed someone down there to conduct their membership campaign and get and their fundraising and plan a major dinner that they had. They had no one on hand in the national office who could help them, and oftentimes our national office would provide professional assistance for key branches across the country who required help and whose production was such that it warranted the national office giving them professional assistance. And it was quite a trial. But I managed to survive the 2 months. And returning from that baptism, I said, I'm finished with the NAACP. So. But he talked me into he said, why don't you just take the rest of the year? I need help in Detroit. These are major branches. I need help in Detroit. I need help in Washington. And I have another branch for which I need assistance. And there were different reasons for each of these, things like demonstrations or marches or special events. For Detroit, it was the inauguration of their first life membership dinner, and this was 1955. So what happened was I was able to get our general counsel, Marshall, to come to Detroit and speak. I said, you owe me this. And he came to speak for this Detroit, their first life membership dinner. And in any event, it went well, but that's how I became involved in NAACP. I never planned to work for the NAACP. I thought about UNESCO, American Friends. My discipline in college and graduate school was social psychology, and of course that's working with people. And I never thought about working for the NAACP, but getting engaged in terms of that temporary job assignment and agreeing to work for a year, finish the year out, wound up from 1955, I retired in 1997, came back to work part-time 2 or 3 times, and I was still here working part-time on a temporary basis. This is temporary for me. I worked in virtually every department of the organization from 1955 until my retirement in 1997. So I knew much about the association. And it was going through a number of leaderships during this period. And of course, they needed this kind of glue to help through these transitions. And I was told to go to Hoxie, Arkansas, to give moral support to the parents whose children were going to the schools which the Board of Education integrated immediately that the Supreme Court had issued that verdict. They did it primarily for economic reasons. They could not afford to maintain a dual school system in that small community. And the school in which these children were placed was virtually a one-room schoolhouse with a board across a creek, over which they had to walk to get into the door of the school. So it was a disgrace. And the children, of course, there were 9 families involved in this move. The Board of Education was happy to integrate, saying we have to conform with the law of the land, and it was a dual purpose. At the same time, there was an organization which was very popular then called White America. They were determined to interfere with this and to stop it. They felt that this would be an example to be used throughout the South especially, which was their concern. There were no hotels in Hoxie to my knowledge. I stayed with a pair of the black parents, and we would have meetings in the evening. I would go with the children to school, and they would and then come back and then talk to the parents at night, and we would have these meetings. So they would maintain a rapport with each other and also not be intimidated. But in any case, the school board stood by its decision, and Hoxie was integrated. That group of children graduated from high school, every one of them except I think one whose family moved away or something. And they had a reunion not too long ago. So it was interesting that they were able to survive and go on and finish and become useful citizens following various professions. Yeah, I didn't spend much time in Little Rock, but I did go because I'd worked with Mrs. Bates going through Arkansas to file petitions for integration of the schools in Arkansas. This is during that period, 2 years to 18 months before Little Rock actually occurred. And there were some interesting experiences along the way. Also, we were able to get the petitions filed with, I think, 42 school boards requesting that they integrate the public schools, and they were to respond the following term, you see. Well, I can't gauge how far we've come, but I can say we have come a very long way from the fact that we had segregated public accommodations across the country, and that we had segregated education permitted by law across the country, that we were not able to attend or go into certain public facilities, all of those things, separate drinking fountains, separate cars on the railway, the back of the bus, all of those things no longer obtain. So in one sense, we have come a very long way. At the same time, we are at a point where we have what I call selective segregation and closing of doors say in the corporate world. For example, it is exceedingly difficult for a minority person to get into a seat of president, CEO, and more often than not, the person who's aspiring has all the credentials and is qualified. So we've got to overcome the thought process and the mindset of the present population, majority of the population, so that we can work toward complete, shall I say, the complete facilitation of the constitutional process. And so we have quite a way to go. It's only at a higher level, and also a level that is limiting to a large amount of the population. in getting there. So that's a job we've got to do. It's more subtle today. There is not a lot of physical violence or overt actions, but the actions at an intellectual level are can be more effective.